Ethan Carter, a black man in his mid-40s with a strong build, was driving down a beautiful country road. The sun was shining brightly, and a gentle breeze was blowing through his open window. Ethan could smell the sweet scent of wildflowers and was feeling very happy and excited. He was on his way to his best friend's wedding, and he couldn't wait to get there. As he drove along, he admired the lovely green hills and tall oak trees that dotted the landscape. The scenery looked like it came straight out of a postcard, with the clear blue sky overhead and the fields stretching out in every direction. Ethan was enjoying the peaceful drive, but after a while, he noticed that the scenery was starting to look unfamiliar. He realized he might have taken a wrong turn. Feeling a little worried, Ethan decided it was a good idea to stop and ask someone for directions. Just then, he saw a small diner up ahead. The diner had a bright red and white checkered awning and a neon sign that said, "Open." It looked like the perfect place to get some help. Ethan was relieved to see the diner and carefully pulled into the gravel parking lot. The sound of the gravel crunching under his tires was a welcome change from the road. As Ethan stepped out of his car, he smoothed down his casual shirt and adjusted his jeans. Even though he was dressed for a road trip, his time in the military had taught him to always look neat and tidy. He took a deep breath of the fresh country air and walked towards the diner's entrance. The little bell above the door jingled as he entered, letting everyone inside know that someone had arrived. Inside, the diner was cozy and warm, with red vinyl booths and a long counter with shiny chrome stools. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, making Ethan's stomach rumble. He realized he was very hungry because he hadn't eaten since breakfast. As he stood in the doorway, he noticed that the few people inside were looking at him with curious eyes. It seemed like people who looked like Ethan didn't come to this small town very often. Ethan tried not to let this make him feel uncomfortable. He smiled politely at the people who were staring at him and walked over to the counter where a middle-aged waitress was cleaning up. He said, "Excuse me, ma'am, I was hoping you could help me with some directions. I think I might have taken a wrong turn." The waitress looked surprised, and her eyes widened a bit when she saw Ethan. She hesitated for a moment, but then said, "Sure thing, honey. Where are you trying to get to?" Ethan explained where he needed to go, and the waitress, despite the awkwardness, was very kind and helpful. She took out a map from under the counter and traced the route Ethan needed to follow with her finger. "It's not too far from here," she said reassuringly. "You'll be back on track in no time." Ethan listened carefully, nodding as she spoke. "Thank you so much for your help," he said with a genuine smile. "I really appreciate it." He felt grateful for her kindness and was ready to continue his journey with the new directions in hand. As Ethan was leaving the diner, he saw a group of men watching him closely. He gave them a friendly nod, but they didn't smile back. As he walked to his car, he felt like someone was watching him through the big window of the diner. He didn't look back. Instead, he enjoyed the warm sun and the breeze from the trees. When Ethan got into his car, he took a deep breath and thought about how nice the waitress had been. Just as he was about to start the engine, he heard screeching tires and loud sirens. Suddenly, police cars surrounded him, their red and blue lights flashing. His heart started to race as officers jumped out with their guns ready. One officer shouted through a loudspeaker, "Get out of the car with your hands up!" Ethan was confused and scared. He thought there might be a mistake, but he remembered his military training and knew he needed to stay calm. He raised his hands and said, "I'm coming out now. I'm unarmed." He carefully opened the car door and stepped out. The hot ground felt uncomfortable through his shoes, but he didn't complain. Another officer told him to get down on his knees. Ethan did, even though it hurt. He saw the officers with their guns ready and felt nervous. He knew any sudden move could make things worse, so he tried to stay calm. As he knelt there, he remembered the many dangers he faced in the military, but this was different. He felt like he was being treated unfairly in his own country. The officers came closer, still pointing their guns at him. One young officer said, "We got a report of a stolen car that looks like yours. What's going on?" Ethan's heart sank. He tried to explain, "There must be a mistake. This is my car. I'm going to my best friend's wedding." But the officer didn't seem to believe him. Another officer, older and with gray hair, said, "Stop talking. Get on the ground now." Ethan lay down on the rough pavement, feeling the heat through his shirt. He knew cooperating was the best way to stay safe. When one officer handcuffed him, Ethan tried to explain again, "Please check my ID in my back pocket. This is a mistake." But the officers didn't listen. They seemed more focused on Ethan's appearance than what he was saying. As they helped him to his feet, Ethan looked at his reflection in the car window. He saw a man in casual clothes, heading to a wedding, now being treated like a criminal. Ethan was upset and tried to stay calm, believing the truth would come out in the end. Even though Ethan was following the rules, things got worse. A younger officer, looking very tense, grabbed Ethan's arm and pushed him to the ground. It knocked the breath out of him, and he struggled to breathe. The officer yelled, "Stop resisting," even though Ethan hadn't done anything. Other officers came over, pushing down on Ethan's back and putting handcuffs on him very tightly. Ethan saw people in the diner looking out the windows with shocked faces, some even recording the scene with their phones, but no one helped him. Ethan remembered his military training and stayed quiet, knowing that any sudden movement might make things worse. The officers were shouting angrily and searching him for weapons, even though he didn't have any. Ethan's face was pressed against the hot pavement, and he thought about his friend's wedding that he was excited about. He wondered if he would make it there. The people watching were a mix of scared and helpless. Some looked away, not wanting to see more, while others kept filming. The officers roughly put Ethan in their patrol car and took him to the police station. Ethan's mind was racing, but he kept his face calm, hoping to get through this. At the station, he was put in a small room with bright, buzzing lights. An officer pushed him into a hard chair, still with the handcuffs on. The officer asked his name and Ethan told him. The officer wrote it down, then asked for ID. Ethan said it was in his wallet, which the officer checked. The officer seemed confused and asked why Ethan was in their town. Ethan explained he was going to his best friend's wedding and had stopped at the diner for directions. The officers looked at each other skeptically. They also asked about the car, which Ethan explained was his and had the registration in the glove compartment. The younger officer didn't seem to believe him. As the officers continued to question him, Ethan could tell they were frustrated because his answers didn't match their expectations. Finally, the older officers said they would run a background check and told Ethan not to move. While they were out of the room, Ethan heard them talking about needing to find something to justify their actions. Ethan knew his record was clean and he had served his country with honor. As he waited, the officers talked in another room. Officer Alex, the older officer, felt something was off about the situation. Officer Reynolds, the younger one, thought Ethan was pretending to be calm. Officer Martinez, a female officer, wondered if they were being too harsh. Officer Alex suggested they might have been too rough, asking if they really needed to throw Ethan to the ground like that. Martinez agreed, saying maybe they should say sorry if Ethan's background check was clean. Reynolds slammed his hand on the desk and shouted, "Apologize? We were just doing our job. He fit the description. End of story." The officers argued louder, with some like Alex and Martinez questioning their actions, while others like Reynolds stuck to their beliefs. Ethan stayed calm, knowing staying composed was important in this fight against unfairness. Suddenly, the computer beeped, and Martinez looked at the screen with wide eyes. "Guys, you need to see this," she said, her voice shaking. The officers crowded around, reading the results. A heavy silence filled the room. Ethan wasn't just an ordinary man. He was a decorated war hero. Officer Alex's hand shook as he read the report aloud. "Medal of Honor," he whispered in awe and horror. Ethan had retired early because of serious injuries from combat. The officers realized they had wrongly accused a hero who had risked his life for the country. Reynolds, who had been the most certain of Ethan's guilt, sat down, pale and sick. "What have we done?" he mumbled. Martinez, with tears in her eyes, said, "We need to apologize. We owe him that much." Alex agreed, feeling the weight of their mistake. "I'll go talk to him," he said. "We can't fix the past, but we can start making things right." As Alex walked to the room where Ethan was held, the other officers stood frozen, feeling ashamed of their actions. They had let their fears and biases guide them and dishonored a man who had done so much for his country. Looking through the mirror, they saw Ethan sitting calmly, his posture dignified despite the unfair treatment. Alex took a deep breath and went into the room, his hands shaking as he opened the door. Ethan looked up, still calm. Alex started, "Mr. Thompson, I'm really sorry. We made a terrible mistake." Ethan raised his eyebrows but stayed silent, letting Alex continue. "We learned about your service and sacrifices. There's no excuse for how we treated you. I'm truly sorry." Ethan's expression softened. "I appreciate your apology, but I'm more worried about being late for my best friend's wedding." Alex suddenly remembered why Ethan was traveling. "Of course, sir. We'll get you out of here right away." He hurried to unlock Ethan's handcuffs, his hands trembling. Once Ethan was free, Alex led him out where the other officers waited, all looking regretful. Martinez stepped forward, her eyes full of tears. "Mr. Thompson, we are so sorry. We'll do everything we can to get you to your wedding quickly." Ethan rubbed his wrists and looked at the officers. "I understand you were doing your job, but I hope this teaches you not to judge people too quickly." The officers nodded, feeling ashamed. Reynolds couldn't even look at Ethan. "We'll escort you to your car and make sure you get to the wedding fast," Alex said, eager to make things right. The officers rushed to get ready. As Ethan left the station, the sunlight felt warm after the cold room. The officers followed, their faces full of regret. Alex asked, "Is there anything we can do to make up for our mistake?" Ethan, still calm, said, "I appreciate it, but I really just need to get to my friend's wedding." Officer Martinez stepped forward, her eyes still shiny from tears. "We can help you get there faster with a police escort," she said kindly. Ethan shook his head with a small smile. "That's nice, but I've had enough of police for today. I'll be fine on my own." The officers nodded, understanding what he meant. They watched as he walked to his car, holding his head up high despite what had happened. When he reached his car, he stopped and looked back at them. "I hope this helps you learn something important," he said quietly. "We all have biases, but we need to recognize and fix them." With that, Ethan got into his car and drove away. The officers stood quietly, thinking about their actions and what they needed to change. They knew they had a lot to fix, not just with Ethan, but with their whole community. Ethan drove to the wedding venue, his heart beating fast. He was late, but not too late. He could hear laughter and music in the air, reminding him of the happy event. He took a deep breath, got out of his car, and straightened his clothes. He tried to forget the stressful day as he walked toward the venue. He saw the bride and groom saying their vows under a beautiful arch. He quietly sat in the back row and smiled at another guest who greeted him warmly. The ceremony was full of love and happy moments. Ethan felt tears in his eyes as he watched his friend get married. Everyone cheered, and Ethan clapped along as the newlyweds walked down the aisle. His friend saw him and was very happy. "Ethan, you made it," he said, giving him a big hug. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Ethan replied, feeling emotional. At the reception, music played and guests chatted. Ethan mingled, laughed at jokes, and danced, trying to focus on the fun. But sometimes he remembered the earlier trouble, and it made him sad for a moment. He pushed those thoughts away and enjoyed the party. As the night went on, Ethan felt happier. He laughed with friends, told stories, and danced a lot. The party was full of love and joy, making him forget the bad day he had. When he danced with his friends, he thought about how different this happy moment was from the earlier trouble. Here, everyone was happy and celebrating together. Ethan wanted to tell his friends about his bad day, but he didn't want to ruin the celebration. Instead, he enjoyed the party, danced until his feet hurt, laughed a lot, and hugged his friends tightly. In the moments of connection and joy at the celebration, Ethan found a bit of relief from the pain and injustice he had experienced earlier. As the night wore on, he found himself standing alone for a moment, watching the festivities around him. The sight of everyone celebrating made him feel a mix of emotions. He felt deep gratitude for the love and support surrounding him, but also sadness for the prejudice that still existed in the world. Despite the joy of the evening, he couldn't ignore the reality of the ongoing prejudice. However, he held on to hope that days like this, filled with unity and acceptance, would become more common in the future. The next morning, Ethan woke up in his own bed, with the memories of the wedding still fresh in his mind. As he went through his morning routine, the events from the diner and the police station began to weigh on his thoughts again. He stood in front of the mirror, his reflection staring back at him with weary eyes. His gaze then fell on the framed medals hanging on his bedroom wall, each one a symbol of bravery and sacrifice. These medals represented times when he had put his life on the line for his country, fighting for freedom, justice, and equality. Yet now, in the very nation he had sworn to protect, he faced the harsh reality that prejudice was still deeply rooted. As Ethan sipped his coffee, his mind wandered to the countless times he had faced similar situations. The sidelong glances, whispered comments, and unwarranted suspicion. These were all too familiar. He had always chosen to rise above it, to be the bigger person, and let these incidents slide. But this time felt different. The weight of the recent events made him question whether staying silent was the right choice. He wondered if he should file a formal complaint, reach out to local community leaders, or simply move on as he had done many times before. The decision felt heavy on Ethan's shoulders. He knew that speaking up could bring attention to the issue and possibly prevent similar incidents in the future. However, it could also open old wounds and subject him to further scrutiny and potential backlash. As he sat at his kitchen table holding his warm mug, Ethan's eyes fell on a photo of his military unit. The diverse faces of his brothers in arms smiled back at him, reminding him of the unity and camaraderie they had shared despite their differences. It was a stark reminder of what he had fought for, a world where people were judged by their character, not the color of their skin. Leaning back in his chair, Ethan felt the internal conflict growing stronger. He knew that his decision would not only impact him, but could also affect his community and beyond. The path forward wasn't clear, but he knew he had to carefully consider his next steps. Meanwhile, at the police station, the officers were still processing the revelation of Ethan's background. Officer Alex Reed, who had led the arrest, sat at his desk with a troubled expression. He couldn't shake the image of Ethan's calm demeanor in the face of such injustice. With a heavy sigh, Ryan opened his computer and began searching for information about Ethan Carter's military service. As he scrolled through the records, his eyes widened with each passing moment. The screen displayed commendations, medals, and glowing reports of Ethan's bravery in combat. Ryan's heart sank as he read about the injuries that led to Ethan's early retirement. The sacrifices Ethan had made for his country were immense, yet he had been treated like a common criminal. "Hey, "What are you looking at?" asked Officer Emma Peters, noticing Ryan's troubled expression. Ryan looked up, his eyes filled with remorse. "I'm reading about Ethan Carter's military service. We really messed up," he admitted. Emma leaned over to look at the screen, her face paling as she took in the information. "Oh my God," she whispered. The weight of their actions pressed down on both officers. Ryan felt a deep sense of guilt and responsibility for how Ethan had been treated. He had been the one to make the call to escalate the situation based solely on suspicion and prejudice. We need to do something about this," Ryan said, his voice filled with determination. We can't just let it go and pretend it didn't happen." Emma nodded in agreement. "But what can we do? He's already gone, and I doubt he'd want to hear from us again," she replied. Ryan thought for a moment, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Maybe we need to look at our own procedures, our own biases. This can't happen again, Emma. We're supposed to protect and serve everyone, not just some people." As they grappled with their mistake, other officers in the station began to take notice. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the reality of what had happened sank in for everyone. Officer Alex Reed took a deep breath, steadying himself as he approached the police chief's office. His heart raced, but he knew this conversation was necessary. He knocked on the door, his knuckles barely making a sound. "Come in," called Chief Harrison from inside. Ryan entered, his face etched with worry. "Chief, do you have a moment? There's something important I need to discuss with you." Chief Harrison looked up from his paperwork, noticing the serious expression on Ryan's face. "Of course, Alex. What's on your mind?" Ryan sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "It's about the arrest we made yesterday, sir. The man we detained, Ethan Carter," he began. He explained the situation in detail, his voice trembling slightly as he recounted their actions. He described how they had treated Ethan, a decorated war veteran, with suspicion and aggression based solely on his appearance. "We made a terrible mistake, Chief," Ryan said, his eyes filled with remorse. "I'm worried about what this means for our department, for our community." Chief Harrison listened intently, his brow furrowing as Ryan spoke. He understood the gravity of the situation and knew that incidents like this could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the individuals involved, but for the entire police force. "I see," Chief Harrison said slowly, leaning back in his chair. "This is indeed a serious matter, Alex. Thank you for bringing it to my attention." The chief was worried about what would happen if the news got out. He knew people would be very upset, and he realized that the problem was bigger than just one mistake. "We need to fix this," Chief Harrison said. "Not just this one mistake, but everything that led to it. We need to look at our training, our rules, and our biases." Ryan felt relieved that the chief wanted to address the issue seriously instead of ignoring it. "What should we do?" Ryan asked, wanting to make things right and prevent more problems. The next morning, Chief Harrison called an important meeting with all the police officers. When they came into the room, everyone was nervous because they had heard about the incident with Ethan Carter. The chief stood at the front of the room, looking serious but kind. He began to speak, saying, "We made a big mistake yesterday." He explained what happened with Ethan Carter, and everyone in the room listened quietly. Some officers looked uncomfortable or ashamed. Chief Harrison told them they needed to work on their biases and follow the rules better. He said they had to protect and serve everyone fairly, no matter what. The chief announced they would start new training and review their rules to make things better. As he spoke, some officers started paying more attention and sitting up straighter. It felt like this could be a chance to improve. Before the meeting ended, Chief Harrison talked to Officer Alex, who was in charge of Ethan Carter's arrest. The chief said, "Alex, you need to call Mr. Thompson and apologize. It should come from you." Alex agreed, feeling a mix of emotions. Back at his desk, Alex looked at the phone with Ethan Carter's number. He was nervous but took a deep breath and called. The phone rang a few times before Ethan answered. "Hello, Mr. Thompson," Alex said, his voice a bit shaky. "I'm Officer Alex from the police department. I wanted to apologize for what happened. We treated you badly and we're really sorry." Ethan listened quietly. Alex continued, "We know saying sorry isn't enough. We want to fix things. We would like you to help us by talking to our department. It could help us do better." There was a long pause. Finally, Ethan said, "I appreciate your apology and call, but I need some time to think. Can I call you back?" "Of course," Alex said quickly. "Take your time and thank you for listening." After hanging up, Alex felt relieved but still unsure about what Ethan would decide. Now, Ethan was just waiting to see if Officer Alex would give him a chance to make things better. Ethan sat in his living room, holding his phone. He was surprised to hear from the police again, especially when Officer Alex apologized so sincerely. Even though Officer Alex sounded truly sorry, Ethan still remembered how badly he was treated. "A public ceremony?" Ethan said to himself, shaking his head. He felt uncomfortable about it. He had never wanted to be in the spotlight or get any special attention for what he did. As he looked out the window at the quiet street, Ethan thought about all the times he had faced unfairness, even after putting his life on the line for his country. He wondered if this ceremony would really help. Ethan remembered when he was younger and believed he could change the world. That younger version of himself would have jumped at this chance without thinking twice. After a lot of thinking, Ethan decided to call Officer Alex back. He was nervous, but also hopeful. "Officer Alex, this is Ethan Carter. I've been thinking about your offer. I've decided to take part in the ceremony. If sharing my story can help bring understanding and change, then I'm willing to join," Ethan said. Officer Alex sounded very relieved and thankful. As the town heard about the ceremony, everyone was getting ready. Officer Alex made sure everything was planned carefully. The chief of police told the officers involved that this was their chance to show they could learn from their mistakes. Some officers were uncomfortable, but others agreed. Officer Miller, who was most aggressive during the arrest, wasn't sure he could face everyone. The chief told him it took courage to face mistakes and that his presence would show they were committed to change. Officer Alex worked hard to organize the event. He invited community leaders to speak with Ethan and got local businesses to help with refreshments. As the ceremony day got closer, Ethan felt nervous. He adjusted his tie and felt the weight of his medals on his chest. At the town square, chairs were set up and banners with messages about unity and understanding were fluttering. Officer Alex checked everything carefully. People began to arrive, filling the square with curiosity and excitement. The officers who had been part of Ethan's arrest stood to one side, feeling a mix of shame and determination. Officer Miller kept his eyes down and fidgeted nervously. When Ethan's car arrived, the crowd went silent. Officer Alex greeted Ethan with a handshake, showing how grateful he was. Ethan looked around and saw everyone. The officers, the community members, and many others who came to listen and learn. In that moment, he realized how important this event was. Ethan looked out his window at the quiet neighborhood he loved. The sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky with soft pink and gold colors. It was a new day, full of possibilities. As he watched the world wake up, Ethan thought about the special ceremony coming up. He knew it was more than just about him or the officers involved. It was a chance for real change in the community. Ethan closed his eyes and took a deep breath, thinking about what he would say. He wanted to turn a tough time into something good and use his voice to make a difference. He hoped people would learn to see each other's humanity, no matter their differences. As the morning light grew stronger, Ethan felt determined. He knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it. He wanted to show that forgiveness could help make things better. Ethan picked up a photo of him and his friends from the military. They were smiling and hugging each other despite the hard times they had faced. The photo reminded him of the strength that comes from sticking together. With renewed purpose, Ethan put the photo down and got ready for the day. He was excited to share his story, speak out against unfairness, and help build a community where everyone felt valued and respected. The day of the big ceremony arrived, and the town square was full of people from all walks of life. They had come to see something special. The crowd was quiet as they waited for Ethan and the police officers to come on stage. When the clock struck noon, the police chief went up to the podium. Everyone stopped talking and listened. The chief looked serious as he spoke. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to talk about a big mistake our department made. We didn't do our job right. We let our fears and biases affect our work, and we are very sorry. The chief's words made the crowd react. Some people nodded, while others seemed uncomfortable, maybe seeing their own mistakes in what the chief said. We are here to own up to our mistakes, learn from them, and promise to do better, the chief continued. This isn't just about one mistake, but about bigger issues we need to fix. As the chief spoke, Ethan stood to the side of the stage, standing tall and calm. He saw the officers who had arrested him nearby, looking ashamed and nervous. Ethan felt for them, knowing it took courage to face everyone after a mistake. The chief's voice grew stronger as he finished his speech. Today, we are honoring Mr. Ethan Carter, a brave war veteran whom we wrongly arrested. His grace and forgiveness teach us all a lesson. With that, the chief invited Ethan onto the stage. The crowd clapped loudly as Ethan walked forward, commanding respect and admiration. The officers who had arrested him also moved towards the stage, ready to face the community and say sorry. As Ethan stepped up, the crowd fell silent. The moment felt heavy, but Ethan's eyes showed hope. He took a deep breath and started speaking. "Good afternoon," he said with a steady and warm voice. "I'm here not just as someone who was wrongfully arrested, but as a person who believes in understanding and forgiveness." The crowd listened closely, their faces showing curiosity and admiration. Many of them only knew him as the man who was wrongly arrested. Ethan took the stage and began speaking with a voice that grew stronger with each word. He talked about how he is much more than just one moment in his life. "I am a son, a friend, and a veteran who proudly served this country," he said. Ethan shared stories from his childhood about his dreams of joining the military and the challenges he faced as a black man in uniform. He told the audience about the strong friendships he formed with his fellow soldiers and how they fought together, not caring about the color of their skin, but only about supporting each other. Ethan's voice carried the weight of his experiences as he spoke about the injuries that led to his early retirement. Many in the audience were moved, their eyes glistening with tears. The officers who had arrested him were there, listening closely with faces that showed a mix of shame and newfound respect. Ethan then reflected on the day of his arrest. "It was a difficult day," he admitted softly, "but it was also an opportunity for growth, change, and healing." He paused to let his words sink in, and the crowd remained silent, hanging on every word. "I choose to forgive," Ethan continued, his voice filled with conviction. "Not because what happened was right, but because forgiveness is the first step towards real change. It helps us move forward, learn, and build a better community for everyone." As Ethan finished his speech, the crowd erupted into heartfelt applause. Tears shimmered in many eyes, and people rose to their feet, moved by his message of forgiveness and hope. The sound of clapping filled the air, showing just how deeply Ethan's words had touched everyone present. When the applause finally quieted, the officers involved in Ethan's arrest made their way to the stage. Their faces showed a mix of shame and determination. Officer Alex, the lead officer from that day, stepped forward first. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke directly to Ethan. "Mr. Thompson, I want to offer you my deepest and most sincere apology, he said. What we did that day was wrong, and there's no excuse for it. Officer Alex took a deep breath before continuing. Your words today have touched me deeply. They've made me realize how much harm our actions can cause, even when we think we're just doing our job. Officer Jamie Lewis then stepped up. We've all been doing a lot of soul searching since that day, she admitted. We're committed to making real changes, not just in how we do our jobs, but in how we see and treat every member of this community. She spoke about new diversity training, community outreach programs, and a new system of accountability within the department. As the officers outlined their plans, the audience listened intently. Many nodded in approval at the proposed changes, while others wiped away tears, touched by the sincerity of the apologies and the promise of a better future. Ethan stood nearby, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. He could see the impact his words had made not just on the officers, but on the entire community. It was a small step, but an important one towards healing and understanding. As the officers concluded their speeches, the police chief stepped forward with a polished wooden plaque in hand. The chief's eyes met Ethan's, filled with a mix of respect and remorse. Mr. Thompson, the chief began, on behalf of our department and our community, we'd like to present you with this plaque. It's a small token of our appreciation for your military service and your contributions to our community. Ethan stepped forward to accept the plaque, his face a mask of composure. The chief continued, this gesture represents more than just an award. It symbolizes our commitment to change and our hope for a new beginning in the relationship between law enforcement and our community. The crowd watched in respectful silence as Ethan held the plaque. For a moment, he felt the weight of both the plaque and the moment. He looked up at the faces before him and saw hope, expectation, and a desire for change. With a nod, he extended his hand to the chief, and they shook hands. The applause began softly but grew louder, spreading through the crowd like a wave. Soon, everyone was on their feet, clapping thunderously to affirm the significance of the moment. The chief raised his voice over the clapping, declaring, "This is just the beginning. We have a long way to go, but with understanding, compassion, and a commitment to justice for all, we can build a better, more united community." Ethan stood tall, the plaque held firmly in his hands, feeling a glimmer of hope. This moment, born from a painful experience, had become a catalyst for change. It wasn't the end of the journey, but a promising start. In the days following, the police department began a comprehensive training program to address bias and reinforce proper procedures, making a clear commitment to better serve and understand the community. On Monday morning, the first group of police officers walked into a meeting room. They felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Officer Alex Reed, who had been part of Ethan's arrest, sat near the front with his notebook ready. Dr. Linda Gray, who was very good at teaching about fair treatment and how police can be better, stood at the front. She greeted the officers with a warm, firm voice and told them they would talk about some tough topics. Dr. Carter led the officers in exercises and talks to help them understand how they might have hidden biases. Officer Alex felt uneasy during a role play where he saw things from the civilian side, feeling the fear and helplessness. Dr. Carter reminded them that the goal wasn't to make anyone feel bad, but to learn how to be more understanding and fair. As the days went by, more officers came to the training. It was hard and made them feel tired, but also wiser. They learned new ways to calm situations, be sensitive to different cultures, and work better with their community. Chief Harrison attended several sessions to show he cared about this learning. He watched the officers face hard truths and have honest, sometimes heated talks. By the end of the first week, there was a noticeable change in the department. Officers were talking more openly about their experiences and were more aware of their own biases. In the following weeks, Ethan Carter became a key figure in a community movement for change. His story inspired many, and he wanted to use his voice to help. One sunny morning, Ethan spoke to a packed auditorium at Westfield High School. He shared his difficult story and talked about the changes needed for a better world. The students listened closely, some surprised and others upset, but they all paid attention. Ethan encouraged the students to speak out against unfairness, examine their own biases, and treat everyone with respect. After his talk, the students asked many thoughtful questions and shared their own stories. Ethan also spoke at community centers, churches, and local clubs, spreading his message of hope and unity. At the Pinewood Community Center, Ethan spoke to a group of adults, saying everyone has a role in making the community better by understanding each other and standing up for what's right. Many people felt inspired, including an elderly woman who thanked him for giving her the courage to speak up about things she had seen. As Ethan continued his work, he saw positive changes in the community. People started talking more openly about race and prejudice. The police department, keeping their promise, worked hard to engage with the community in a positive way. Ethan helped set up a community advisory board to bring different voices together to tackle inequality and promote understanding. The police department, inspired by Ethan's message, began new community programs. Chief Alex, committed to making lasting changes, gathered his officers to plan their next steps. He said they had made a good start, but needed to do even more to rebuild trust with the community. Officer Ryan Mitchell, who had been part of Ethan's arrest, raised his hand to contribute. "Chief, I want to help with these new programs. I feel I owe it to Ethan and to our community." Chief Harrison smiled and said, "I appreciate that, Ryan. Your experience will help others learn." Over the next few weeks, the department started new programs. They began a Coffee with a Cop, where officers met people at local cafes to chat. They also organized community sports events where police played friendly games with local kids. Officer Davis and his team, who were part of Ethan's arrest, took part in these programs. They talked about their mistakes to teach others, including both officers and community members. At one Coffee with a Cop event, Officer Davis spoke with Mrs. Martinez, an older woman who was always wary of police. He said, "We want to do better. We're here to listen and learn." Mrs. Martinez's eyes softened and she said, "It's good to see you trying. It makes me feel a bit safer knowing you're working to change." The department also started a mentorship program pairing officers with at-risk youth. Officer Emma Brooks, who was there during Ethan's arrest, volunteered to help. She was paired with Tariq Johnson, a teenager who had trouble with the law before. Emma told him, "It might be hard to trust me, but I'm here to support you, not to judge you." Over time, these programs showed results. The community started to see the police in a new way. People who were once unsure of officers now greeted them warmly. Ethan's story of forgiveness and the police department's efforts to change began to spread. Local news covered it, and soon national media picked it up. Ethan's message of understanding and unity touched people all over the country. One day, Ethan got a call from a producer of a popular national talk show. The producer said, "We want you on our show to share your story." Ethan agreed, knowing his story could help others and promote change. On the show, with bright lights and a big audience, Ethan shared his story. The room was silent as he spoke. Ethan said, "It would have been easy to be angry, but I chose forgiveness. Only through understanding can we make the world better." The audience clapped loudly, many with tears in their eyes. Ethan's appearance went viral, and soon he got invitations to speak at events all over the country. He traveled to share his message at universities, community centers, and even a big police conference. Everywhere he went, people were moved by his words and belief in forgiveness. At a big rally for social justice, Ethan spoke to a large crowd. He said, "We can let our experiences make us bitter, or we can use them to make a change. I choose change and hope. Ethan became a symbol of resilience and the power of forgiveness. Ethan's story inspired many people across the country to start working on making police and their communities better. After Ethan became famous, the small town where his story began started to change in amazing ways. This town had been known for having problems with its police force, but the people there were determined to make things better. They wanted to fix the issues and make sure everyone felt safe and respected. The police department, which had once been at the center of controversy, began to learn new ways to be fair and kind. They started new training programs that focused on understanding different cultures and being aware of biases. Officers had to go to regular workshops led by community leaders, including Ethan himself. These workshops helped the police understand and connect with the people they served. As a result, the community saw a big improvement. There were fewer problems with unfair treatment, and traffic stops became much smoother. People felt more comfortable and safe around the police. The change didn't happen all at once, but it was steady and positive. Ethan was always there, helping and supporting everyone in the community. He organized monthly town hall meetings where people could come together, share their concerns, and work on finding solutions. These meetings became important for bringing the community together and making sure everyone had a voice. People from all walks of life came to these gatherings, showing that they were willing to work together to build a better future. One sunny afternoon, Ethan stood in the town square, surrounded by a diverse group of community members. Children were playing nearby, and their laughter showed how safe and happy everyone felt. Ethan looked around and said, "Look at what happens when we choose understanding over anger and unity over division. We've come a long way, but our journey isn't over. Every day we must choose to see the humanity in one another." The police chief, who had once been unsure about the changes, agreed. He said, "Mr. Thompson, you've taught us all a valuable lesson. We're committed to continuing this work and being the kind of police force our community deserves." As Ethan continued to guide the community, his positive influence spread to nearby towns. They noticed the good changes in Ethan's town and wanted to make similar improvements. Ethan always talked about the importance of empathy and working together when he gave advice. As the sun set on another day of positive changes, Ethan found himself sitting on a park bench, watching families enjoy the evening. The park, which had once been a place where people from different backgrounds didn't mix much, was now a lively, friendly place. Ethan saw an officer who had been involved in his story playing with kids from different backgrounds, and it made him feel warm inside. Ethan thought about the journey he had been on and how his experience had led to so many positive changes. The anger and hurt he had felt had turned into understanding and forgiveness. The police officers who had once been skeptical were now champions of change, working hard to build trust with the community. Ethan felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing his efforts had made a big difference. He knew there was still work to be done, but he felt hopeful and ready to continue working for a better world. Do you think you could forgive someone who made a mistake like Ethan did? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. I work hard to write these heartwarming stories for you, and your support keeps me going.